Market on Close. I'm Marley Caden. It's time now for Overlooked Stocks. Shares of Sealed Air are rallying today on the back of a report the company is in talks to go private. Joining us now, George Tsilis, our senior markets correspondent, to talk more about Sealed Air and this potential news of them going private. George, walk us through what we know here, because shares are up more than 16% so far today.
Yeah, it's actually having a really good day for Sealed Air, and I think considering the market conditions, there are some bright spots. This is certainly one of them. But I didn't know this company beforehand, but I'm sure you're familiar, and a lot of people are familiar with their products. Essentially, it's a leading package solution provider. They provide things like food-grade packaging, automatic equipment solutions for food safety and like shelf life for food. But they're probably mostly known for things like bubble wrap and essentially the auto bags, which essentially are those packaging products you see in those Amazon boxes. So it's quite competitive industry space, I suggest, and maybe that's why if you look at Sealed Air, this year at the least, it's positive now after today's movement to the upside. But I did notice that some of the other players in the space, which include Sunoco Products, Ranpak, Symbol Pack, as well as Avery Dennison, all these stocks have not performed very well in the last year and the last 3 years. So I think it's maybe indicative of the competitive landscape that these businesses are facing right now. And of course, margin pressures, considering cost of goods sold, have been increasing for materials like timber, which is used for packaging of boxes, and of course, all of the other commodities associated with that. But today, the news was really about the potential now of a takeover, or essentially going private through, of course, a valuation proposal by private equity. If you look at the Jefferies analysts, they essentially have a $40 price target on the stock, but they also state that the valuation of the company could be valued anywhere between $40 and $80 and $48, forgive me, based upon the expectations that if the private equity firm does make the purchase of them, that they're going to look at some benchmark historical valuation multiples. Some of the elements that they talked about, the analyst now at Jefferies, is looking at the historical earnings multiple, or EV to EBITDA multiples, around 9 to 10 times. Right now, it's actually trading at those approximate levels, considering the price action we saw today. But I did notice that this name is also trading at a discount to price to sales, around 1 time sales on a trailing basis versus about 1.5 times on a 5-year average. And the earnings multiple for this name is also trading at a discount at 11 times earnings versus 14. So there's a valuation element here as well, but I think there's also an element of maybe consolidation in the industry, considering the competition is quite rich. And like I said, when I looked across the board to many of their competitors, some of which I mentioned, they have not performed very well, at least in the last year and as well as the last 3 years.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, looking at them and knowing they're the makers of products that we use in our everyday lives. You mentioned the creators of bubble wrap, but also these the cryo seal bags, those cryovac shrink bags, and all the Amazon packaging, food packaging. As far as how they're performing, they're up 25% year to date. So I suppose it makes sense why they're the target. But this move to the upside does put them sort of in that range that Jefferies was mentioning as the potential bid. Do you think that this could potentially stick around, or will we see them dip back down as some of this quiets?
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good question. And so one of the things I've noticed in situations like this is obviously this is still speculation, so you have to consider that. If this does not manifest, there's a possibility it would fill the gap back to the yesterday's close. But again, if the valuation is somewhere between $40 and $48, and just based on some of those other metrics like price to sales and price to earnings, the stock could inflate relative to those to come in alignment with those 5-year averages. And I think that's why the analyst has that range, which is still quite large, between 40 and 48. So again, looking at this from a trader standpoint, using today's low as a possibility benchmark where the stock could settle and maybe essentially accrete higher slowly over time to get more in line with some of those higher end price targets between $44 and let's say $48, again, considering that the stock is still trading at a lower price to sales and price earnings ratio than its historical averages. Now, again, you have to consider that those averages in the last year relative to those 5-year numbers might be lower, because I did notice that sales on a trailing basis as well as on a forward basis for Sealed Air are still expected to be down about 1 to 2%. Versus historical average, which are positive 1 to 2%. So again, we're at an inflection point in terms of sales and earnings. I can see why it's trading at a discount to historical averages because of those numbers. But this could also create a situation where the valuation multiples inflate for the entire group. So that's something you have to consider. Again, still speculation, but looking at today's low at the very least to hold if you're looking at a potential continuation.
George, we appreciate you being with us to talk all things Sealed Air. Right now trading at 42.32, just off of the lows on today's range, 42.15. That's George Tsilis.